After almost a full decade, we finally have our first look at Zombieland 2. Director George Miller confirms that there are Mad Max Fury Road sequels still on the way, and Spider-Man Far From Home becomes the first Spider-Man movie to pass $1 billion at the worldwide box office. That, and so much more, coming right up. Hello ladies and gentlemen, and movie lovers of all kind, and welcome back to another Wednesday Weekly News. And as always, I am your host, Brett Murphy. Before we start this week off, be sure to hit that subscribe button and click that little bell icon so you can be notified about all of our latest uploads. Now, let's get right into it. We finally have our first look at the Tom Hanks starring A Beautiful Day in the Neighborhood, which is a true story looking at a small portion of Mr. Rogers' fantastic life. We also got our first look at director Taika Waititi's new film, Jojo Rabbit. The satirical comedy also sees Waititi starring as Adolf Hitler. Guillermo del Toro is looking to scare audiences into their seats, rather than out with the final trailer for Scary Stories to Tell in the Dark. We also got a second trailer for the Will Smith-starred Gemini Man, which is directed by Ang Lee, and sees Will Smith de-age to take on an older version of himself. We also got a second look at the very under-the-radar The Goldfinch, and also another look at the third film in the Has Fallen franchise, Angel Has Fallen. And lastly, of course, is the big one for this week, and like I said earlier, after nearly a full decade, we finally have our first look at Zombieland 2. A lot of people feel that this movie is just long overdue and they don't really care at this point, and it seems like a lot of the comedy is forced and they're just really trying to grab onto some sort of nostalgia to get people back to the theaters. But for myself personally and many others, this movie looked like dark comedy gold, and just outrageous enough to top the original. Zombieland 2 will be dropping in theaters this October. And now, this week's confirmed news. Director George Miller confirms that there are still at least 2, maybe even 3 Mad Max Fury Road sequels on the way. I love Mad Max Fury Road. It is top 10 movies of all time for me and quite possibly my favorite action movie of all time, and the sequel is long overdue. Spider-Man Far From Home becomes the very first Spider-Man movie to pass $1 billion at the worldwide box office. Despite there still not being a general consensus whether it is the best or worst of the Spider-Man films, a huge congratulations goes out to Marvel Studios as well as Sony for this accomplishment. Marvel Studios will be presenting a peek at exciting projects at the upcoming D23 Expo on Saturday, August 24th at 10 a.m. Pacific Standard Time. Cinematographer Greg Fraser, known for Foxcatcher, Rogue One: A Star Wars Story, and Zero Dark 30, has signed on to do the cinematography for Matt Reeves' The Batman. Sylvester Stallone says that there is a good chance that he will come back for another Rocky movie, but the catch is that it will not be a Creed movie. Rocky is mentoring a young man who gets trapped in the country. This man is very angry and he needs somewhere to channel that anger. Enter Balboa, of course, as a mentor once again, and we have another Rocky movie. Matt Groening confirms that he believes that Disney will in fact give the go-ahead on The Simpsons Movie 2, which is another long-awaited sequel that fans have been clamoring for over a decade. Vin Diesel confirmed on his Instagram that a script for a 4th Riddick film is in fact finally finished. Will it ever see the light of day? It's hard to tell because the fan base just might not be there anymore, but Mr. Diesel himself sure seems excited to get going on it. The Teenage Mutant Ninja Turtles co-creator Kevin Eastman confirms that Paramount is in fact working on a new movie, but he does not seem to know whether it will be a continuation of the Michael Bay produced reboot films, if it'll be a new live-action version or a new animated version. Next is that Mr. Quentin Tarantino himself has confirmed that he has been in discussion with star Uma Thurman for a Kill Bill Volume 3. Geez, this week has just been full of long-awaited sequel stuff. Kevin Smith has publicly stated that he is rewriting Clerks 3 to try and persuade his co-star Jeff Anderson to come back on board for the 3rd film. The two famously had a falling out before the first sequel was even in production. They still did the movie together, but people are unsure where the relationship is at. And lastly, for this week's confirmed news, we finally have our first look at Netflix's The King, a story about Henry V starring Timothée Chalamet. The rumor mill was definitely slow starting this week, but luckily it picked up a bit of pace by the end of the week. Firstly, Currently, the reported runtime for It Chapter 2 is a whopping 2 hours and 45 minutes. That's scarier than Pennywise. No, I kid. I am a fan of long movies, so I'm not completely against this, and the source material, well, it's a book about yay big. There's still about a little bit more than a month if they kind of want to shave a little bit more off and maybe save the rest for some sort of director's cut, but we will just have to wait and see how it goes. The shortlist for a director for Venom 2 has reportedly been revealed, and the shortlist includes Andy Serkis, Travis Knight, and Rupert Wyatt. For myself personally, I love Andy Serkis. He is the king of mocap, and he is one of the actors that I consider any film that he is in to be better automatically because he's in it. But I don't know if he is quite right for Venom 2. For me, my personal pick would go to Travis Knight. The way he reinvented the Transformers franchise with Bumblebee, I would trust him with just about anything at this point. Rupert Wyatt, though, of course, another good choice. I would take any three of them. I am very impressed with that shortlist. Next is news that is very exciting for Robert De Niro, Martin Scorsese, or Leonardo DiCaprio fans, and that is that Robert De Niro is set to star alongside Leonardo DiCaprio in Martin Scorsese's Killers of the Flower Moon. And lastly, Indiana Jones 5 is finally set to begin filming in April of 2020 in London. Before we continue, if you're enjoying this content but want more up-to-date news, be sure to check us out on social media, where we provide everything you need to know in the movie industry as soon as it happens. Now, back to the video. For this next portion, we will be looking at the reactions to the latest released big Hollywood films. And the only really big flick that came out this weekend was Quentin Tarantino's 9th film, Once Upon a Time in Hollywood. The general consensus for most is that the cast is on their A-game. They nailed the 60s aesthetic, and overall it is a well-crafted and brilliantly executed film. But there is a general consensus for some because not everybody loved it. And there has even been some criticism to the way that the Manson murders were handled. But it seems that critics enjoyed it just a smidge more than audiences, and the audience seems to be a touch more divided. And now popping up will be the IMDb audience score as well as the Metacritic score. And these ones seem to be a bit more in tune, with both audiences on IMDb and critics alike adoring this film for all the right reasons. And now, of course, for the last portion of this video, folks, and that is the box office numbers. Coming in at first place once again, and to no one's surprise, is Disney's The Lion King, and for this weekend, Mickey Mouse raked in another nice $75.5 million. Coming in at second place, and Quentin Tarantino's biggest box office opening of all time, is of course Once Upon a Time in Hollywood, with a wonderful $40.3 million, which is once again Tarantino's biggest and a pretty nice haul for an R-rated movie. After that, Spider-Man Far From Home was able to cross the $1 billion mark by making another solid $12.2 million this weekend. Toy Story 4 remaining strong at the 1 month mark with another $9.8 million added to its haul. And closing out our top 5, and another number that makes me quite happy, is Crawl bringing in another $4 million. So that was it for this week's news. If I missed anything, be sure to leave it in the comments to let us all know. And while you're down there, be sure to tell me what you thought was the most shocking or surprising news of this week. As always, thank you so much for watching, and that's a wrap.